Well, thank you all very much for coming. You're going to hear some very exciting things that many of which we may already know, but in the context of getting ready to do our unveiling. So with that, see, I'm going to be very short and sweet because I want to hear what they have to say. So I'd like to introduce Reverend Michael J. Watkins from the Fellowship CME Church. Reverend Michael?
Good morning. Let us pray. Oh God, how we thank you for this day, and we give you praise for waking us up this morning. Thank you for this event to honor this great woman. We thank you for those who organized it and those who thought it not robbery to give her honor. Thank you for the citizens of this great city and this county. And Lord, this looks a little bit like heaven, seeing people gathered together in unity. I pray that you'll help us to draw closer to each other and also draw closer to you. So bless this event, and we give you praise, we give you honor, we give you glory. For it's in Jesus' name I pray. Now I'm like I'm in the church now. Can you say amen? Amen. Amen.
Boy, it is like heaven. This is the real-life version of a Zoom meeting. It's great. Great. A few years ago, just right before the pandemic, someone asked me how this came about. And I went back through history, and I went back to Harry Truman. After he was president, he went back to his hometown of Independence. And someone, a reporter asked him, they said, "Are you upset that there is no statue of you in Independence?" And Harry Truman said, "I'd rather people ask me why there isn't a statue of me than why there is." And what started everything rolling, after reading Gil's books, it was, why isn't there a statue of Mabel Norris Reese? The bigger question here for all of us this morning is, who is she? And why should we even care about Mabel Norris Reese? I think it's, well, we have different speakers. We have a high school student, an artist, an author, a family member. All of us have different perspectives about Mabel, but it all gets down to the fact that she exemplifies courage. And she didn't get off on the right track. In fact, when she found out she was wrong, she had to admit she was wrong. And then all of a sudden, she sort of transformed into a protector. And I think by nature, women are protectors. I'm sure a lot of you drove with your mom when she had to slam on the brakes and mom's safety arm goes out. Mom wanted to protect. And she had the instincts of a protector. And if you read the books by Gilbert and Gary Corsair, she came to protect the Groveland Four and the Platt children and Jesse Daniels. And there's another point I'd like to make. If you study history, you'll realize human nature is a constant. So reactions 5,000 years ago were the same as 2,000 years ago, as in 1950 and as today. And I'll demonstrate that Mabel is contemporary. What she went through is what all generations go through. After the Brown versus Board decision in the Supreme Court in May of 1954, she started reporting stories in the Mount Dora topic sympathetic to the decision by the Supreme Court. And that led to the Ku Klux Klan going to her house here in Mount Dora, burning a cross in her yard. And she had to stand up to the Klan, one woman against the Ku Klux Klan. And I'm just going to read you a portion of her editorial. "I do not intend to withdraw my claim that it is cowardly and it is despicable to show defiance to the Supreme Court of the United States by burning a cross. Though a cross burst into flames in front of my home on Monday night, I shall not take it as a signal that I should lapse into silence, that I must now bow in abject fear to the Ku Klux Klan and write no more editorials such as the one condemning the recent cross burnings in Easttown or those deploring organized efforts against the Supreme Court segregation decision. I will continue to speak as one who intends to inject a small voice of reason and sanity into a situation which could divide our nation in this, her most trying hour." And 70 years later, Mabel is still reminding us of our responsibilities as citizens in a democracy. All of us need to speak up against the lie. We need to speak up louder against the big lie. And one final note, if anyone's curious about what I'm most proud of about today, and about what people across America donated to make happen, each spring I travel to Washington, D.C., where I teach middle school students. I teach them civics, I teach them about history, I teach them about government. And we could start in the Capitol. There's 100 statues in the Capitol. 91 of those statues are of men. 9 are of women. I could walk those students from the Capitol to the Lincoln Memorial, 2 miles. They would not find a single statue of a woman. I'd have to cross the street, go through the Franklin Delano Roosevelt Memorial, take them to the 4th chamber where, hidden in a little alcove, is the one woman, Eleanor Roosevelt. That's what they have. The Smithsonian American Art Museum's inventory says of approximately 5,200 public outdoor sculptures of individuals, just 394 are of women, so less than 8%. That's a really clear signal, excuse me, to women and young ladies that their contributions really don't matter. They do matter. Mabel Norris Reese proves that. When this statue is unveiled in just a few minutes, it's going to be a permanent reminder to young ladies in particular, and women, all of us actually, what our responsibilities are and how we should aspire to courage. With that, I'm going to let you hear from a young woman who's president of the junior class at Tavares High School, who was inspired by Mabel, who will now see a role model on permanent display. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Annika York.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak today, as it is truly an honor to be able to stand up here for all the young women that could be inspired by Mabel Norris Reese. I'm honored to be a part of a ceremony commemorating such an inspiring woman. I first heard about Mabel at the unveiling of the terracotta bust in 2020. I was immediately intrigued with her, as her courage and passion for uncovering the truth was just so prevalent. After the ceremony, I bought a copy of Devil in the Grove to further understand the civil rights history of Lake County. And to no one's surprise, I learned about her standing up to one of the most powerful people in Lake County. It is hard to truly grasp the amount of courage it took for her to use her voice, risking her life and family to fight for what she believed in. This was not fearless, as there is certainly no lack of fear in a situation like this. It was pure courage, being afraid yet still persisting. When she did find that truth, she had to overcome many obstacles just to be heard, as she was still just a woman in a man's world. Yet that didn't stop her. She investigated the preconceived notions, provided the facts, and printed the truths. She never gave up. She didn't let other people's thoughts and actions discourage her, because she followed her intuition so wholeheartedly that she didn't need to look to other people for approval. This is why Mabel Norris Reese will continue to be a role model for so many like me. In social media, it is easy to get engrossed in how other people perceive you, to the extent that you are too afraid to have a differing viewpoint. This can lead to supporting a misconception only because it's popular. But if we know the facts and support justice, we shouldn't be afraid to follow Mabel's brave example. It would be naive to believe that Mabel only had the opportunity to speak up because of the social issues of her time, but social injustices still occur today. The key difference between Mabel's time and our own is that we don't need a printing press to influence thousands. Thank you.
Very nice. The future senior class president of Tavares High School. Congratulations. That was wonderful. Would you like to sing a song for us? No? Okay.
If you want.
Okay. That's great. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very, very proud to introduce a true public servant, a former educator who was a Florida state senator and is now the current Florida representative for District 44, Representative Geraldine Thompson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
We're all here to honor a woman who showed tremendous courage. And the test of courage comes when you're in the minority. It doesn't take a lot of courage if you're saying what everyone else is saying. And certainly it's easy to go along to get along. But that was not Mabel Reese. She had the courage when she saw injustice to call it out and to point out that just because people are in power doesn't mean that they're right. And so she was willing to accept the consequences. And when you show courage, when you go against the flow, when you swim against the tide, there are consequences that come along with that. But she was willing to accept the consequences. You know, the statute that will be unveiled momentarily is very important. Memorials are very important. And you all may remember the story of a people leaving bondage, moving toward freedom, and they came to what appeared to them to be an impossible barrier, and that was a body of water. But they were blessed, and the Mabel Norris Reese, and then we can tell the story. So I'm delighted that you're here. I'm delighted that I'm here. I got in late Thursday night from Tallahassee. The legislature has begun committee meetings, and I'm serving on redistricting. Yes. And so I'm ready for the fight. I'm ready for the fight, and I am committed to continue the hard work, because it's not an easy job. And Mabel's job was not easy. And we have to make a lifelong commitment to social change. In 2017, I was in South Africa, and I visited Robben Island, the prison where Nelson Mandela was incarcerated for over 2 decades. And I stood at that cell and held onto the bars, and I saw the cot that he used and a bucket. And I thought, he made a lifelong commitment to social change. And so none of us can afford to stand on the sidelines. And so, as I said, I'm glad to be here. I'll be back in Tallahassee in a couple of weeks. The memorial, this statute will be here to remind all of us how we have come. Thank you so much.
There you go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, moving right along. A few years ago, when the idea for public sculpture began, I had to think of who we could commission to create the piece, and automatically the decision was simple. It's our next speaker. Jim McNalis is a world traveler. He's a humanitarian. If you'd like to know more about him, just come see me afterward. But he only accepts commissions of men and women, he said, who exemplified the dignity of the human spirit. And when he learned about Mabel through Gil's books, it was like, when can I start? And so I'm very, very proud to introduce a close friend and a wonderful artist, Jim McNalis.
Morning. Somebody once wrote, in order for evil to exist, it only requires that good people do nothing. When Gary asked me to do the sculpture, and I found out about Mabel, I can't tell you what a challenge it is to do a sculpture of someone that is unavailable. You've never met them. You don't know anything about them. And the words bust, statue, strike me as very static and archaic. What I'm looking to do in these sculptures is to get below the surface, beyond what a person looks like, and find out what makes them tick. What makes each one of you individual, like no other. That's what I'm going after when I do these sculptures. So Under these circumstances, I had to begin to rely on Gil's terrific books. If you haven't read them, I'd encourage it, and fasten your seatbelts when you read those books. And I had the advantage of working with one of Mabel's closest pals, her granddaughter, Cindy. So I relied heavily on their input. And through Gil's books, he told me what Mabel did. Cindy told me who Mabel was. So I was off and running, but then I went to the primary source and read everything that I could find that Mabel had written. And what synthesizes her for me, and I kept thinking of it during the process, I must know I'm right, then I go ahead. And I kept thinking of that, and it was, I must know I'm right. Due diligence, that's the professional journalist. Do the research, get the facts, then I go ahead. That goes from professional journalist to a remarkable, courageous woman. At no point in her writing did she say, I've got my teeth into a story that could put me in grave danger. Never crossed her mind to say, I'd better be careful how I write this story, or maybe I shouldn't write it at all. It goes back to simple and direct. I must know I'm right, then I go ahead. And while I'm doing that, totally focused on this person while I'm doing the sculpture, I begin to ask myself, could I do that? What if I were in Mabel's shoes? Would I do that? When you ask yourself questions like that, you're changed forever. That's why I'm the beneficiary of doing sculptures of remarkably inspiring people like Mabel. I'm not the same guy who began the sculpture when I finish it. And I think that's what she represents to all of us. It's like, who is she and why should I care? You know, we look at role models, most people, entertainment industry, sports and all, that's fine. But we can't forget that it hasn't been erased from the human gene pool, people who are inspiring, people we admire, and people who have enormous courage. And I began to realize that the common denominator among the sculptures I love to do, these are people who stand for principles they consider more important than their own well-being, their own personal safety. Wow, that's amazing. And when I was younger, I used to think, through movies, the heroes, I always thought, hey, there's a special branch of the human race who are just bigger than all of us. And they're the heroes that ride into town, save the widow's mortgage, beat the bad guys, and we forgot to thank that. Who was that masked man? What really is amazing, they're imperfect human beings like us all. And there's something inside them. It pulls a trigger, an event, a person, something that happens, and it usually has to do with injustice, something that diminishes us and the human race, and they make their move. That's pretty inspiring. So I can't tell you how happy I am to have created the sculpture of Mabel. There's a role model. She is a woman for all seasons and a brilliant role model for all of us, not only now, but in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. I met our next speaker in the early 1980s, and we lost track of each other until about 8 years ago. And in that whole time period, he's always inspired me. He's always impressed me. And when his Pulitzer Prize winning book, Devil in the Grove, came out, and Gilbert and I reconnected, and I found that he had spent, I believe, over 5 years working on this. I'm a writer myself, but over 5 years working on one subject, not knowing if it would sell. It's not a topic most people would want to buy. it was faith. He was stepping into faith to create this book, and it was that inspiration that he had in, say, 2009, 2008 that brings us here today. And now I'm going to bring Gilbert King to the podium to say a few words.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I just want to thank Gary for all the work that he and Nancy have done to make this possible. It's much more work than you could possibly imagine, having read all the emails. So it's an impressive fit to get something like this done. You know, celebrating Mabel, I just listened to all the words of inspiration from Representative Thompson and Gary and Jim. You're going to hear Cindy soon. I just thought I'd really tell one of my favorite Mabel stories, just to give you an idea of who she was and her character. This was about 1970, okay? And she had been working on this case about Jesse Daniels, this young mentally disabled kid who had been framed for a sexual assault that he did not commit. And he didn't get a trial. He got sent straight out to Chattahoochee without a trial, where he sat for 13 years. And Mabel stayed on this case. In 1970, she was actually already chased out of Lake County. She had, you know, her home was bombed, her office was defaced by the Klan, a stake was laced with strychnine, thrown over her fence, killed her dog, and the final straw was some white supremacists in the area had opened up a rival newspaper and basically threatened all her advertisers not to advertise with Mabel anymore, and that was it. Her paper was just ruined. She had to sell it and leave town and go to Daytona. And in Daytona, years later, she's still working on this Jesse Daniels case. She meets a young lawyer in his 20s by the name of Richard Graham and basically convinces him to take Jesse's case. And Richard Graham is living in Daytona. He doesn't know anything about Lake County, but he agrees. And at one point, they have to go over to a hearing in Lake County. And this is when Richard Graham is starting to learn about Sheriff Willis McCall, starting to hear about the stories of the Groveland boys. And as they get to the court, Richard Graham is having a moment of hesitation. And he looks into the courtroom and he can see the sheriff and these murderous deputies. They're all wearing their, you know, hats in court with their guns, and they're looking pretty ominous. And Richard Graham turns to Mabel and goes, "Geez, Mabel, these guys look like they mean business." And he said Mabel shot him a look of disgust and just said, "Just stand behind me," and marched straight up to the front of the courtroom. And to me, that's an action. That was Mabel. She was not afraid. And she just was determined to continue to keep pressure for justice. That's what she was reporting on. And I think this is going to be a memorable day, really celebrate the legacy of who this courageous journalist was. And, you know, we've talked about the influence, whether as a family member, as a friend, as a journalist. For me, I really am inspired by her courage, because I do find myself in some of those similar situations. And I try to channel Mabel when I'm thinking that. All right, just walk up there and stay behind Mabel. So thank you all for coming out here, and we're going to really enjoy this day. Thank you.
All right. Well, before we bring up our final speaker, I did want to have a few honorable mentions. I'd like to recognize some people here today. Nancy Howell, my wife right up here, who's been working with me, beside me, for the last 3 years. Vershawn Ford right over there, who designed the program that you're reading today and organized this event. Chris Carson right next to Vershawn over there, who organized everything that's here in the plaza. Mount Dora Public Works, who helped create the setting for this memorial. They were out here. Robert Harper, his friend Mark, Amy Jewell standing right over here, the Mount Dora Arts Council, Mount Dora City Council, the Community Trust, and in particular donors from across America. When they heard her story, we started a GoFundMe site, and I thought it was just going to be Mount Dora people, just Lake County people. Then it was like, well, no, it's Central Florida, then it's Florida, then it's people in New York, people in California who would hear her story. And if you'd like to learn more about it, more in depth, just go to remembermabel.com. That's remembermabel.com. And there's a group of women here today. If you raise your hands, they're working on getting Mabel inducted into the Florida Women's Hall of Fame. And they've been at it for 3 years. Trust me, ladies, it'll be another 3. But it'll be remembermabel.com/HOF. You'll see that in your program. And now our final speaker this morning is Mabel Norris Reese's granddaughter, Cindy Chesley Erickson.
Thanks to Charles.
Good morning. When Gary asked me to speak, I started thinking about, okay, we're going to have dignitaries, political, we're going to have the student, we're going to have Gil, we're going to have Jim. So I thought, I need to put the family spin on it. So I started thinking about my grandmother being in her early 30s. She and my grandfather moved from Akron, Ohio with their 6-year-old daughter. They bought this newspaper. They moved down here with all these high hopes of living in this idyllic Central Florida town, running the newspaper. And she did. She started with the newspaper, reporting on the society events and things like that, going along with the status quo, what the sheriff and everyone told her. And then it turned into a nightmare. It turned into her dogs getting poisoned, her house getting firebombed, her getting a phone call saying that my mother was in danger somewhere, trying to lure her out onto a dark road in the middle of nowhere. And she thankfully drove by the house and checked on my mom first. And like Gil said, eventually her paper was defaced. She was essentially run out of town. And how heartbreaking. Her marriage ended. And, just everything that she was so hopeful for as a young mom, just, went straight to hell. And she moved to Daytona, made a new life, worked for the Daytona Beach News Journal, but still had just that festering wound of what had happened here in Mount Dora. And then I thought, well, look at this. Look at what's going on. Look at how she is finally welcomed back to Lake County and Mount Dora with open arms. So I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you for my grandmother. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. And I appreciate you being here today.
Okay, well, with that, I would like to thank everyone for coming out this morning. Thank goodness, what a beautiful day. I beg your pardon?
Charles Ravel, you forgot.
Oh, Charles Ravel, I beg your pardon. I did mean to mention Charles. When you do a project on city property, it's like, somebody went to Grand Canyon once. They said, how long did this take to create? And the ranger said 6 million years. And the guy says, I didn't know it was a government project. And while it seemed to be taking that long, Charles here, the city manager / interim city manager, cut through a lot of red tape for us. And I really appreciate you doing that. You'll see our annual parade of cameramen going over there, so they know something's about to happen, and that's going to be the unveiling. I honestly can't thank everyone enough. This has been a labor of love, but it's the inspiration was and is an inspirational woman, and I hope you take that with you when you leave here today. But if all of you would like to join us over here, we'll unveil the bronze permanent sculpture of Mabel Norris Reese.